Now, in our last lecture, we examined Macbeth. And in our whole series, we have talked about love, and the life lessons that we learn from love. And what we have learned is how much trouble love causes and how much destruction it causes. We started with the Alcestis of Euripides. Well, that wasn't too bad, but out of love, this lady did lay down her life for her husband and leave her children behind, and then poor Hercules had to grapple with death and beat death up in order to bring her back. Then there was Medea, the play of Euripides, the tragedy. And there we saw how Medea was so driven by love that she killed her own children to get back at her husband, Jason, for deserting her, when he was just trying to do the best thing for everybody, secure their position and wealth. Then we went on and we looked at Tristan and Isolde, this magnificent story of courtly romance, and all the suffering they had to go through, all the lies and deceptions, and then finally Tristan dying and Isolde having to die just out of love for him. So do you see the trouble that love has caused, yes or no? And then finally we go to Antony and Cleopatra. And Shakespeare tells us about the destructive qualities of love and how Antony threw away the chance for world empire just out of love. But instead of making him happy, it made him miserable, it made Cleopatra miserable, and they both killed themselves. And Lady Macbeth, what a poisonous relationship that was. And how many bodies had to fall, how much blood had to stain Scotland out of that love. So I think what we should do is just get rid of love. And that is what we're going to do in our next book, in our last book, in our theme of love. And that is The Brave New World of Aldous Huxley, the English novelist. He was born in 1894, and he came from an extremely influential English intellectual family. His grandfather had been the biologist T.H. Huxley, who had done such a job in performed such a service in defending Darwin. He was related to Matthew Arnold, the essayist and poet. He was related to T. Arnold, one of the most influential educators of the 19th century in England, Arnold of Rugby, who reformed Rugby School. And his own father was an influential editor of a magazine. And Huxley was born into this position and to some wealth and certainly leisure. He went to the best school in all of England, Eton College. Then he went on and studied at Oxford and took his degree there. He had suffered a very bad eye infection that cost him a good deal of his vision. And he wasn't able to serve in World War I, and it also limited for a while his ability to read. But he started out on a career as a writer, first as a journalist, then writing novels. And in 1932, he published Brave New World. I believe it to be one of the most prophetic books of the 20th century. And we began our story in the year 632 AF. We'll come back to what AF means, but it is 600 years after 1932. And we are truly in a brave new world. We are in London, and we are at the center for hatching and education and conditioning, hatching and education. And this is the main center there in London where new little creatures are created and trained to be good citizens of this new world that has as its slogan, community, identity, and stability. And we are going around with the director of the hatchery as he introduces a group of new workers there to how the tasks are done there and why the job is so very important. And they feel very honored that the director himself is showing them around. And there's a long assembly line, and you see how the little embryos are laid on the assembly line, having been gathered very scientifically and hygienically. Then each one is fertilized, and then they go along and they receive just the right inoculations so that they'll never be sick, so that they'll never have any birth defects. Then, having seen how they're produced, then we'll see how they are conditioned. And we go up to the upper floors, and there are these little babies crawling around, and these little babies have on a khaki uniform. And they're the group that is being trained to be dutiful workers on an assembly line. And you don't want them thinking too much, for our whole society in the brave new world is divided into groups. They're the alphas, they're the smartest, just like an A in school. They're the betas, they're the gammas, they're the deltas, and they're the epsilons. And little creatures like the deltas, you do not want interested in books. In fact, you don't want them interested in nature. Because just going out enjoying nature, walking amidst the flowers and trees, that doesn't spend any money. And in this brave new world, the whole society is geared towards a consumer economy. And that is how everything is kept stable, is by everybody spending a lot of money on things you don't really need. So you need a lot of people who can enjoy nature. They do enjoy sports, though. All kinds of, almost like computer sports, video games. Or they'll also enjoy sports that take a lot of equipment. So you don't want these little babies, these little deltas, let's say, to enjoy flowers or books, because books are a solitary enterprise. So are these little babies crawling along on the floor, and the new workers are all watching this, and books and flowers are put down on the floor, and all this real soft music is played, and nice perfume is put in the air, and the little babies are attracted to it. And they go up to where the books and flowers are, and suddenly they get a terrible electric shock, and they crawl away howling. There, the director explains, 1 or 2 more treatments like that, and they'll never like books or flowers again. Then you go on further up to the floors, and there are these older children, because nobody is raised with a parent. In fact, the very word family is almost an obscenity. Not quite, but almost an obscenity. Father is closer to being an obscenity, and mother is an obscenity. And the director keeps having to explain to these new workers, with their fine education, that there really was a time when there were children who were born out of mothers. And they had real fathers, and they all lived together, and there was not even any supervision of the family. I mean, the house could be dirty. The education could be left to the parents or to schools, where they then came home to parents. Now everybody lives in these nice dorms, and everybody is conditioned. Hypnopedia, it is called. And while you're asleep, these messages are played in. I am so happy that I am an alpha. I get to boss everybody else around. Our uniforms are a beautiful gray. We love them. Oh, I am so glad I am a delta. The alphas have to work too hard. I like people telling me what to do. I have an easy work day. And so, all night long, this is what they hear. And they are raised just to fit into that mold. And the director of the Hatchery and Conditioning Center asks if there are any questions. And there are a few embarrassed questions, and one of them tries to bring up, were people really born? Yes, they were. But all of this changed, you know. It had to change for the better. For the world was just too unstable, and passions were just too uncontrolled. And there was the 9-Year War, when vast armies came together, and all the science and technology of the time was used in warfare. There was poison gas. There were anthrax bombs. There was more germ warfare. And there was a terrible economic crisis. And ultimately, we had to realize that it was either destroy civilization or have a one-world state. And we're all so much better off. Why, there is his Ford ship, Mustafa. Mustafa, who is one of the 10 world controllers. What a nice old gentleman he is, your Ford ship, Mustafa. We are so honored that you would come and talk to us. No, as much as I can, I'd like to come and talk to young people. Yes, what the director is telling you is absolutely correct. There was this terrible war, and we set in place a world government. And we decided that we would date everything, not by the old past, but by the new past. Do you know there were things called museums in those days that had all of this material from the past? They had to be blown up. There used to be something called books, but books served no useful purpose. So all those books were put away. Do you ever read a book? No, not really. No, you don't need to. You have all these wonderful video concoctions to watch. AF. Yes, that always calls to mind the prophet who showed us our way. Ford. Henry Ford. He was the first to show what an assembly line was like. He was first to understand the need for consumer goods. Why? He understood, first of all, that people must be given goods that they can spend money on. That's how the economy goes. And you have to develop a desire for those goods. So the horse wasn't good enough. You made it seem dirty and energy inefficient. And you came up with these wonderful machines, and they were produced on the assembly line there in Michigan. However, the trouble was that not very many people could buy cars. They were too expensive. So our Ford understood that you give your workers pretty good paychecks. And with those pretty good paychecks, they can buy cars. And you make the price of the car affordable. You make it completely standardized, and they can buy one. And Henry Ford indeed said that anybody can have any color Model T they want as long as it's black. So everything is standardized. And he also showed us the way to hypnopedia. But interestingly enough, whenever our Ford talks about the mind, he called himself Freud. But he showed us how that the mind was filled with all of these unconscious desires that led to terrible things, and how dysfunctional the families were, and all the evils that went on as a result of families. So he showed us the way to a consumer economy, and he showed us the way to personality stability. And that is the wonderful world that we live in now, where we have peace and community, where everyone's identity is assured to them by their education and training, where we have no birth defects, no epidemics break out, and where we have complete stability. No more wars, no more suffering, no more starvation. Now, does that sound bad? Does that sound bad at all? And there, working in the hatchery, are several young intellectuals, members of the alpha groups. There's Bernard, there's Helmholtz, there's Henry, and they're all at the top of the alpha level. But also in our brave new world, nobody needs to feel passion or needs to feel rejected, because everybody can have all the sex they want. We haven't gotten rid of sex, we've just gotten rid of romance. And it is very common for someone to have 400 or 500 boyfriends or girlfriends in the course of 1 or 2 years. And their term for it is, I had him, I had her, I want to have him, I want to have her. And the girls all wear, or the women all wear, these elaborate contraceptive devices. And sex is very open and very free. In fact, you're looked upon as strange if you stay with somebody more than 1 or 2 times. And in the evening, you fly wherever you want in a kind of helicopter. Almost everybody has one of these. And the favorite entertainment is to fly to some other place, not walk, but fly. It's a little suspect to walk. And there to engage in the feelies, they are called. And these are essentially pornographic shows, with pornographic scenery and lighting and music. Maybe not too very different from a rock concert, I ponder. And then go back to your apartment, where everything is available, not just nice food, but even your taps, your water taps flow with different kinds of perfumes. Why, you might have 8 different perfumes in your bathroom. But Bernard and Helmholtz are just a little strange, because control and condition as you might, somehow a little bit of personality comes through. And these two have struck up a friendship. They both know that somehow they're looked upon as a little outside the group. And they like to be by themselves some. And they even think about reading. But They like girls, and one of their girlfriends is named Lenina. And Bernard says he wants to take Lenina with him to a reservation. Because you see, not every part of this world has been sanitized. There are a few areas that have been kept wild, as the Brave New World sees them. They are filled with what the Brave New World calls savages. And these are kept almost like safari parks, where you can go and see humans the way they used to be. And one of these is in New Mexico. They're Native Americans. And Bernard wants to take Lenina there. But he has to get special permission. So he goes to see the director of the hatcheries and conditioning center. And the director of the hatchery has had his eye on Bernard for a while. Young man, he said, I keep getting unsatisfactory evaluations of you. These keep coming up to me and suggesting you spend time by yourself, that frequently you are make asides about whether any of this makes any sense. Is this true? We are watching you. What do you want now? You need to sign permission for me to go to a reservation. A reservation on a vacation. Well, maybe that's just what you need, young man. You know, and the director leans back in his chair and recollects, I went to one of those once. Well, I was just about your age, and I was in some of the same trouble that you are. In fact, they were going to send me to an island. That may happen to you. You might be sent to Iceland or the Falkland Islands, and there you can be with a lot of other people who like to be by themselves and can't get along. But I learned my lesson. I went out to that reservation. It was a lovely place. And I took a girl with me, and we went hiking up in the mountains, and we were coming back, and there was a terrible thunderstorm, and she fell off one of these mountains. And I had to stumble back to the lodge where we were staying and get help to come back, and we couldn't find her. Never found her. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Now he's really irritated. But here, I'll sign it and see if when you come back, you cannot be a better fit. We don't like round pegs in square holes here. There's no room for that. So they fly out. Lenina's there with Bernard, and they spend the night in Santa Fe. Now that's even greater. Why, they have all manner of what we would call video games. All sorts of perfumes flowing out of the taps. Then the next day they fly to the reservation. And they have to present their letter of recommendation and their pass to and the visa to enter the reservation. And they get a guide and they fly out. And the girl, Lenina, is just taken with awe at all of this beauty. And then they land in one of the pueblos, a place like Taos. And there is a ceremony going on. And there are real people, not the sanitized people of the Brave New World, but Native Americans dancing. And some of them have dirty hair. And some of them smell. And there's garbage on the street. And there are unkempt dogs and cats roaming around. And they're praying. They're praying to a figure that the girl has never seen before. A man on a cross. A statue of a man on a cross. And then they're praying to an eagle god, to Jesus and to this Native American god. And they're speaking in strange languages like Spanish and Zuni. And suddenly, one of the worshipers rushes up to them as the worshipers begin to beat their backs with whips, flagellate themselves. Why would you inflict pain upon yourself? Wonder these two creatures from the Brave New World. And the man comes up and says, my name is John. And they look at him, and unlike the rest of the crowd, he has blonde hair and blue eyes. And he says, I want you to meet my mother. She comes from out there where you're from. And they go into his little home, and Lenina is shocked at the dirt and smell, their unwashed dishes. And this very fat woman rushes up to them. And she's old, she's got wrinkles, because no one in the Brave New World has wrinkles. Everybody lives until they're 60. And they're kept young and vigorous, and then suddenly they're just gone. But this lady has wrinkles. My name is Linda, she says. I used to live, when you come from London, that's where I lived. And I came out here with my friend, and we're going to have a wonderful time. Suddenly, Bernard's ears began to pick up. Your friend? Yes, his name was Tommy. Tommykins, I called him. Oh, director of the hatcheries, his name Thomas. Yes, and somehow I got pregnant. I don't know how. I took all the Malthusian pills available, but I got pregnant. And then I fell off of a cliff. We think he pushed her, actually. And Tommykins never came back. And nobody ever came for me. And I've stayed here all these years, and I brought forth John. I've tried to teach him. I've tried to teach him to read. And in fact, the one thing that John has had available to read to him is an old copy of the complete works of Shakespeare. And whenever he speaks, it's in a kind of Shakespearean English. And Linda says, please take me back with you and take John back. And Bernard says, you're absolutely right. That's just what we're going to do. So they fly back. And there, they arrive back in London, and there's the director again, being very pompous and pontificating to a new group of young workers, taking them through the hatchery. And Bernard comes up. And suddenly Linda, this old, wrinkled, blonde-haired woman, shouts out to him, Tommykins, don't you remember me? And Bernard just smiles. He's not going to be sent to any island now, is he? And she runs up and embraces the director. And he's shocked and overwhelmed. And then there is John. And he runs up and embraces the director and says, Father. And the workers cannot keep back their laughter. Mother, that's a bad word, but Father, that's just ridiculous. And he calls this man Father. The director is absolutely disgraced. But young John, or John Savage, as he is called, becomes the toast of London. And so does Bernard, his friend who has brought him back. And Bernard gets invited to parties he's never been invited to. Even the lead song singer, who might once have been called the Archbishop of Canterbury, comes to Bernard's place to see the Savage. What a remarkable thing. But it's too dangerous. And the Savage cannot bear the strain of all of this. He has fallen in love with Lenina. But love cannot exist, and she is overwhelmed with this idea. She wants casual sex, but not love. And finally, John locks himself in his room and has to be brought before his fordship, Mustafa. And the fordship is a very genial man and invites John into his large room and begins to talk to him, Helmholtz and Bernard, all three. You men are intelligent enough to understand a few things, that everything that we do is for the common good. It is for community, identity, and stability. But you've banished books. Yes, well, we had to banish books. There was too much bad in the old books. And it appealed to too many bad emotions. And nobody wants them anymore. Yes, but you want everybody just to buy and buy and buy. Well, of course we do. How else can the economy function? We'd have an economic crisis if there were no consumer confidence. So yes, people have to buy. They have to stay entertained. They can't love, but they can have lots of sex. And we have not had war for 500 years. Are you not telling me that we made a good trade-off? Helmholtz says, I want to go to an island. You may. Would you like to go to a South Sea island? No, I want to go to somewhere where it's a harsh climate. We'll send you to the Falklands. You'll like it there. It's better there. You'll meet all kinds of interesting people. You can even do some real science there. I used to be a pretty good physicist, says Mustafa. But we can't have real science here. We have only controlled science. But science, too, leads to too many ideas. Now, I'd like to just talk with John for a while. Mr. Savage, do you have questions? And the Savage begins to speak his Shakespearean English, and Mustafa can answer him. He knows Shakespeare well. You know all of these books, yes, of course. Very few of us are allowed to read them. We know how to deal with them. What about religion? You've driven religion away. Do you remember how many crimes were committed in the name of religion? Suffering, pain, all of that. We've eliminated it. People don't need it. Do you believe in God? Oh, says his Fordship. Well, there might very well be a God. I don't doubt it. But he's unnecessary in our world. He too just made people sad. Now, what are we going to do with you? I don't think you can go back to the reservation. I'd like to go somewhere, says John Savage, and just be by myself. I cannot understand this world. I hate it. Oh, yes, because you weren't raised in it. You didn't have the conditioning. Would you like to go and be by yourself, maybe in a lighthouse? Yes. So he's sent off to a lighthouse on the coast of England. But even there, he can't be alone. The press has now discovered the savage, as they call him. And every time he tries to come out of his little lighthouse, they're there, snapping their flash bulbs. Turn around for us, Mr. Savage. Do something strange. Beat yourself with a whip, Mr. Savage. And they will not let him alone. And then the tourist industry discovers him. And he becomes a consumer item. And special helicopters are chartered to fly people out there to watch him. And the madder he gets, the more they like watching him. He's made a little bow and arrow, and he shoots one up into a helicopter. And the crowd loves it. And every day, he hates this life more and more. Then one day, a reporter shows up and pushes open the door of the lighthouse. Mr. Savage, are you there? And looks up, and he sees the feet of this man destroyed by the brave new world, swinging like the points of a compass to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south. And he has died, of course, killed himself. Something also unheard of in this brave new world. Brave New World, the very title comes from Shakespeare, from The Tempest. O brave new world that hath such people in it. And in Shakespeare's day, the discovery of the New World seemed to open up a whole new page in human history, where all the evils of Europe could be left behind and a new paradise on earth created. Of course, it didn't. The destruction of the Native Americans, the importation of slaves, war. Wherever man goes, man pollutes. And Huxley believed that once science had offered just that hope, that the new science and technology that the 19th century had worshiped so much, that we still worship so much, would offer a brave new world where war could be abolished, where human suffering could be abolished, where nobody needed to be sick or have disabilities. And instead, science and technology just became one more engine of destruction. And some years after Brave New World had been published in 1932, Huxley wrote a foreword to the new edition. And he described how all technology had led to were greater engines of destruction, like the atomic bomb, to an uncontrolled human nature, and that much of the blame for this lay on the scientists who had put their knowledge at the behest of evil, and the educators who had utterly failed in their duty. If you want a motto for educators, stand amidst the ruins of Hiroshima, said Huxley. If you seek my monument, look around you. And he saw the only possibility in the future, either a world divided into a number of powers, each possessed of the nuclear bomb and threatening one another with nuclear destruction, or a world government like the Brave New World, totalitarian in character, maybe a gentle totalitarianism, but controlling everyone and everything in the name of prosperity, or better yet, community, identity, stability.